Hi everyone, tonight we're going to talk about something strange, something a little accidental, and something that if you ever get it right, might just live rent-free in someone's mind for years. Picture this, soft yellow light overhead, an old bamboo mat under our feet, and 2 mugs of warm green tea between us. That night was quiet in a way most nights aren't anymore. The kind of quiet where you can hear your thoughts breathe. I wasn't trying to impress her. In fact, I didn't think I had much to say that would matter at all. But sometimes, when you're not trying, something slips out. Something real, something so gentle and unguarded that it lands like a feather and somehow leaves a dent. And I remember clear as the tea in that chipped porcelain cup. She paused mid-sip, looked at me, not confused, not surprised, just different. Like something had shifted and she hadn't quite caught it. But her whole body noticed now. Let me confess something. I didn't even know what I said. Not at first. It wasn't until 2 days later when she texted me out of the blue, quoting my words back to me like a lyric from a song I forgot I'd written. 3 words, simple, barely spoken above a whisper. You probably think this is going to be some pickup artist nonsense, some mind game move. It's not. In fact, if you're hoping for a silver bullet, you're in the wrong forest, friend. It's more like that moment you step barefoot onto cold tile at night. You didn't plan it, but you'll never forget how it felt. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Drop your location and what time it is where you are in the comments. I'm always curious how far these words travel now. Turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. She'd just gotten back from a long trip, one of those find-yourself retreats, the kind with sweat lodges and silent breakfasts. Stayed put, working late, rereading books I already knew the endings to. When she showed up at my door that night, I wasn't expecting deep. I wasn't expecting anything really. We sat, we drank, we didn't talk much. The air was heavy but not uncomfortable, like after a long rain when the street is still glistening. Then she said something about how strange it is to feel disconnected from people you care about. Something about how hard it is to come back and not know what's changed. I looked at her and I said 3 words, not loud, not planned, not even intended to impress, just a soft truth, slipped out like steam from a kettle. Her eyes didn't widen. She didn't smile. She just stopped, like time hiccuped. I changed the subject after that. It didn't seem like a big moment, but sometimes the smallest cracks let in the most light. 2 days later, she texted, "You know what you said that night?" I didn't. She reminded me, and I swear, I still felt the pause between her words. She said she'd been thinking about it all morning, that it made her feel something she couldn't quite explain. Safe, maybe, or seen. And here's the kicker. I didn't even mean to say it, not consciously. But that moment, wrapped in silence and steeped in comfort, held those words like they were sacred. You don't always know when the words you speak become memories for someone else. You don't always get to pick which moment becomes permanent. That night, that tea, that pause. Yeah, that was the beginning. You'd think that if something you said had that much impact, you'd at least remember saying it, right? But no, that's the thing about timing. It hides in the shadows, slips into the gaps, and turns simple sentences into something echo-like, something sticky. And, man, I had no idea at the time. See, timing isn't just about clocks and calendars. It's about emotional windows, those tiny openings, when the heart is cracked just wide enough to let something in. Most people miss them. We talk too fast, fill the silence, step on our own meanings. I used to do it constantly, still do, sometimes. That night, though I didn't. Maybe it was the tea, or maybe I was just too tired to overthink it. But when I spoke, I was floating in the same emotional frequency as her. Our moods aligned, like two radio stations syncing in the static. Her trip had left her emotionally raw, and I was just ... present. There's something academically interesting about the concept of emotional synchrony. Some psychologists argue it's the true foundation of intimacy, not shared values, not attraction, not even love, just those brief, rare moments when two people feel in tune, even if they don't fully understand each other. It's like the emotional version of catching the same beat in a jazz improvisation. You don't plan it, but when it happens, it's magic. And in that moment, when I said those 3 words, she was open, receptive. That timing made the words feel heavier than they were, more sacred. We never talk about that enough, do we? The weight of words depends entirely on when they're dropped. The same sentence at the wrong time feels forced, even manipulative. But at the right time, it feels like fate. Like the universe whispered something through your mouth and you didn't even notice. I remember another time completely unrelated, when a guy I knew confessed his feelings to a woman over text at 3 a.m. She didn't reply for 2 days, and when she did, it was a dry, I don't feel the same. Crushed him. Thing is, she actually liked him. She told me that weeks later. But the timing was off. She was dealing with a sick parent, hadn't slept in days, and his text just felt burdensome. Timing ruined what could have been something beautiful, and yet here I was, stumbling into perfect timing without even knowing it. That night, I'd said what I said, not because I thought it was clever, or deep, or seductive. I said it because it was the only honest response to the silence between us, and she heard it like a chord she'd been waiting for. The funny thing, when she texted me back about it days later, she said she kept hearing it in my voice, not reading it, hearing it. It played in her head like a voicemail from the soul, and I realized it's not just about the words themselves, it's about the emotional timing, like rain falling just as you exhale, like someone offering a blanket before you even admit you're cold. We spend so much time trying to find the right thing to say, but maybe the real trick is learning when not to say anything, and waiting for that moment when words aren't just heard, they're received. That night, I got lucky, but luck, I've found, often disguises itself as silence. And sometimes, in that quiet space, something real finally speaks. There's a kind of strength that lives in silence. Not the kind that's brooding or passive-aggressive. I mean the kind of quiet that fills the space instead of shrinking into it. That's what I learned next. And I didn't learn it from a book or a podcast or some self-help bro who drinks bulletproof coffee and calls it enlightenment. I learned it from watching her. She wasn't in a rush to fill the air. That night, she just sipped her tea, tucked her legs under her, and waited. I think that's what opened the door for me to speak. She gave the space permission to breathe, and in that space, I said the thing. The 3 words, barely louder than the hum of the ceiling fan. I won't spoil them yet. That part's coming. But what I will say is, they didn't land because of their content. They landed because I wasn't pushing. I wasn't chasing her reaction. I didn't need her to do anything with them. That made all the difference. There's an old saying, I think it's Japanese, but don't quote me, that the quieter you become, the more you can hear. It applies to more than just listening. It applies to presence, when you can just be there, without the need to perform or impress or dominate the space. People start to feel like they can breathe around you. That's a kind of masculine energy nobody talks about. Not the chest-thumping, know-it-all, alpha male stuff, but the deeply grounded presence that doesn't need to chase approval. Kind of calm that lets silence stretch out like a hammock instead of a rope. Now, some might argue that silence can be misread. Sure, sometimes it gets awkward, but I've found that awkwardness often comes from our own resistance to stillness. We feel like we have to fill every second, or the moment will collapse under the weight of its own quiet. But in that moment with her, the pause was everything. I remember I leaned back, slightly, not a dramatic gesture, just a shift of the shoulders. My mug warmed both hands, and for a second, the only sound was the faint clink of her teaspoon resting back into the saucer. And then, boom, I said it. I didn't even look at her face immediately after. I just let it drift. The silence after was longer than it needed to be, but not too long. Just enough for her to process it. Just enough to make the words echo a little louder inside her chest. That's what I mean by the masculine pause. It's the ability to hold space for your own words after you've released them. To trust that they'll land where they need to, without having to chase them down with more explanations or nervous laughter. There's a quirky theory in performance. Studies it's called affective resonance. Basically, it suggests that the power of a moment isn't in the action, but in the reverberation it leaves behind. That's what happened that night. My words weren't fireworks, they were a low bell ringing in the background. Long after the scene had moved on, and she remembered that. She told me later, you didn't just say it, you let me feel it. That stuck with me, because how often do we say something and then bulldoze the moment with filler? Or apologize for the honesty before it has a chance to bloom? That night, I didn't do any of that. I just said it. Then I stayed still. Let the air settle. Let her breathe. And in doing nothing, I did everything. You'd think if a moment sticks in someone's mind, it's because of the words, right? The syllables, the structure, the actual thing you said. That's what I thought too until I learned otherwise. See, when she brought it up again, days later, she didn't quote me exactly. She paraphrased, added emotion to it. She didn't remember the phrasing I did, barely, but she remembered how I made her feel. And not just during the moment, but long after. It was like she'd packed that feeling into her suitcase when she left and kept unpacking it over and over again. I know people like to say women remember everything, but that's not entirely accurate. What they remember is how they felt. That's the sticky part. The actual words, sometimes blurry, the emotion, burned in. It's the same reason you remember how a song made you feel, even if you can't recall a single lyric. It's not the daytide's the echo, and I had unknowingly created an echo. That's when I started to rethink all the conversations I'd ever had. All the times I tried to say the right thing, impress with cleverness, be charming like I was auditioning for a Netflix role. And all the times it fell flat, because while I was focused on the words, they were absorbing the mood, the tone, the vibe, the sense of being safe, or being judged, or being seen. I read somewhere once that memory is more like a painting than a recording, that every time you revisit it, you're repainting the picture slightly, maybe adding a little more warmth, a little more shadow, You don't replay the moment, you remix it. She did that with our moment. I'm sure of it, and honestly, so did I. I remember her hands cupping the mug like it was keeping her grounded. I remember the way her feet were tucked sideways on the floor, not crossed, just soft. I remember that she wasn't wearing perfume, but the room still smelled faintly of jasmine and worn-out lavender from the cushion behind her. Small things, but those small things held the emotion like frames around a photo. What she remembers, though, is that I didn't flinch when I said what I said, that I didn't wait for her approval, that my voice didn't rise at the end like a question. It landed like it knew where it belonged. And here's something odd, I asked her, much later, what it was that made that night stick. She said it wasn't just the words, it was how I didn't try to sell them. They came out like a truth I'd lived with long before she ever heard it. And that was the key. There's a curious little academic debate I once came across about emotional authenticity versus performance vulnerability. Basically, can you act authentic and still be felt as real? Or does the feeling have to originate from something spontaneous and raw? I think it's both and neither. I think people, especially women, have the most sophisticated emotional radars on the planet. They can detect sincerity like a tuning fork detects pitch. If you're faking depth, they feel the splash but not the ripple. That night, somehow, I wasn't faking. I didn't even know I was revealing anything. I was just ... not hiding. That was new for me, and that's what she remembered. Not the line, not the quote, not the tea or the mat or the jasmine smell. She remembered the feeling. She remembered me. It's strange how we're taught to hide the parts of ourselves that are actually the most magnetic. Like showing vulnerability is a liability. Like softness is weakness, especially for men. We're trained from a young age to hold it all together. The jaw, laugh it off, man up. You know the drill. But the moment I said those 3 words that stuck with her, I wasn't being strong in the way I was taught. I wasn't defending a position or showing off. I was simply open. I cracked the door to something real. Not wide open, mind you, just enough to let a breeze in. Just enough to let her wonder what was behind it. And that's the thing. You don't have to dump your soul on the table to be vulnerable. You just have to show that there's something there. A little scar tissue, a little hope, a little fear. Something honest that hasn't been polished for public display. There's this theory, one I actually do agree with, that people fall in love in the spaces between stories. In the moments where you say something small, but it's charged with meaning. When I told her those 3 words, it wasn't about impressing her. It wasn't even about her. It was about me sharing a little piece of my world. And it landed because she felt that it's funny, used to think vulnerability looked like crying in front of someone or spilling your past like some tragic monologue. But sometimes it's just saying, I missed that, or that made me feel stupid, or I thought of you when it rained. The tiniest truths, if they're real, can echo louder than the biggest performances. That night, when she looked at me after I spoke, there was a stillness in her. Not shock, not emotion, just ... stillness. Like a lake when the wind stops. She didn't reply right away. She just stayed there, eyes steady, mouth closed, and I could feel something ticking. Between us, not tension, more like calibration. Like we were suddenly tuned to the same frequency. That's the thing about emotional resonance. When you open up, even just a crack, it invites the other person to do the same. And sometimes they do, not with words, not right away, but with presence. with energy, with that slight leaning in that says, I see you. There's also this odd, off-topic fact I love. Octopuses, yes, stay with me have 3 hearts and blue blood. But here's the wild part. When they feel safe, they literally change colors, smoothing out their skin. It's their version of vulnerability, and it only happens when they trust their environment. Humans, we're not that different. When someone makes us feel safe, our defenses smooth out. The color returns. We say things we didn't plan to say. We let things slip. And when we do, connection happens. She later told me, that was the first time I felt like you weren't wearing a mask. It wasn't an insult. It was an observation, and it hit me like cold wind on warm skin. That night, my honesty wasn't grand. It wasn't even brave, but it was real. And realness, I've learned, is rare enough to be memorable. So I cracked. A little, just a little. And through that crack, she didn't see weakness. She saw me, and that made all the difference. Okay, so here we are. The moment you've probably been waiting for. The actual 3 words I said that night. The words that looped in her mind for days. Like a melody you hum without realizing. You ready? I said. I feel safe. Yep, that's it. 3 simple words. Whisper level volume. No dramatic tone. No eye contact held for effect. Just a quiet truth that slipped out like breath. She was talking about something. I don't even remember what, honestly. Something about how people don't really see each other. And I, staring into the slow swirl of my tea, said it almost absently. I feel safe. And here's why it hit her like it did. Because men rarely say that. Especially not to women. Especially not without turning it into a joke or a deflection. And I didn't say it about her. Exactly, I said it in her presence. In the room she had helped make feel that way. She didn't interrupt me. Didn't thank me. Didn't lean forward with some romantic movie gesture. She just nodded, slowly. Like she understood that it wasn't a compliment. It was a signal. That moment told her more than any poem or love letter could. Because let's face it, safety is rare. Emotional safety. Almost mythical. Most people don't know they're carrying tension until it leaves their body. They don't know how tightly they're holding the steering wheel until their fingers hurt. I hadn't realized I'd been bracing. For something disapproval, misunderstanding, maybe just being ignored. But with her, in that room, I let go of the wheel, and it felt good now. If you're expecting some kind of fairy tale ending, here's slow fade to a kiss, a long relationship, maybe a proposal under a willow tree, sorry. Real life's messier than that. Our story wasn't a straight line. There were detours. We drifted apart later, gently, like leaves in opposite currents. But that moment, it stayed. She told me much later that after that night, she kept replaying the sound of my voice. Not the words themselves, but the way I said them. She said it felt like being trusted. Like she'd been given something rare, without having to ask for it. And here's what's funny. I almost didn't say it. I remember the thought crossing my mind, don't say that. It'll sound weird. Too soft. Too soon. But I said it anyway. Because it was true. And I didn't dress it up. Didn't apologize for it. Just dropped it into the moment like a pebble into a pond. The ripples, they're still moving. I've come to believe that the right words, spoken at the right time, become more than memory. They become a presence. They linger. They change the texture of a place, of a relationship, of a person. And here's your academic phrase of the night. Liminal resonance. It's that fuzzy edge between thought and emotion, where words vibrate just enough to alter someone's internal frequency. I didn't invent that term. I just lived it for a moment. Now, could those same 3 words fall flat if used elsewhere? Sure, say them too soon, too flippantly, or with the wrong energy, and they mean nothing. Worse, they feel manipulative. But say them honestly, in a moment of true calm, with no agenda. Yeah, they stay. So if you're ever wondering what to say, maybe ask yourself, what's the truth I'm afraid might sound too soft? That might just be the thing she never forgets. I wish I could tell you that moment turned into a forever story. That saying I feel safe was the start of some poetic, enduring romance that ended in matching rocking chairs and shared crossword puzzles. But it wasn't. And that's the part no one tells you. Powerful words don't guarantee permanence. They can shape a moment, carve a memory, even shift someone's emotional landscape for a while. But they don't control the outcome. They don't owe you anything in return. We drifted apart the way people sometimes do, not from drama, not from damage, but from distance. Life moved. Seasons changed. Calls slowed down. And one day I realized I hadn't seen her in 3 months. The echo of those words stayed longer than we did. Still, I don't regret saying them. If anything, I think more people should, but only when they mean it. Here's where things get tricky. You can't bottle those words and spray them like cologne. You can't use them as some kind of emotional cheat code. If you say them without feeling them, you'll hollow them out. Turn something sacred into something salesy, and you'll feel that difference, even if the other person doesn't say it out loud. That's why I haven't said them since. Not those exact words. Not unless I feel it again. Because I don't want to turn them into currency. I want them to remain what they were, honest, gentle, rare. There was a time back when I was younger, louder, dumber, when I used to think saying the right thing was about timing and technique. And yes, we've talked about timing. But the truth is, there's no hack for depth, no shortcut for resonance. You either mean it or you don't. And the other person always knows. I remember this older man I once met at a wedding, retired mechanic, big hands, gentle voice. He told me the secret to long relationships wasn't communication or chemistry or any of that Instagram philosophy stuff. It was sincerity. That if you say something and don't mean it, it sticks to your soul like lint. You start carrying weight you didn't earn, he said. And sooner or later, it slows you down. I think he was right. So if you're going to say something that echoes, say it slow. Say it like you're not trying to be heard, but simply trying to tell the truth. Say it once, and let it breathe. Don't say it to get a reaction. Don't say it to manipulate someone into staying. Say it because you've arrived at a quiet place inside yourself. Found someone else just happens to be near enough to hear you. And know this, the more you try to use words to impress someone, the less they mean. But the moment you stop needing to impress, they start to stick. So if you ever find yourself in the soft stillness of a real moment, and the words rise up from that calm, fragile place in you, say them, but only if you're willing to live by them afterward. Because these words, they're not matches, they're fire. And fire, left unattended, will either warm a room or burn it down. So that's the story. A few quiet words, spoken in stillness, with no agenda, just honesty. They didn't rewrite the future, but they shaped a moment neither of us ever forgot. And maybe that's enough. In a world filled with noise and performances, something real still has weight. If you carry anything from tonight, let it be this. Say what you mean, only when you mean it, and let silence do the rest. Now, slow down. Your thoughts, let them float like mist through your chest. Let the last glow of this story dim gently in your mind. Good night.